So raise your hand if you're a Maria
Sum up the
Callas
opera.
fan. Yeah, I am too, but my partner hates her. So it's kind of a love-hate. But I don't think there is, so many divas have done Tosca, but I think she put the bar so high that I could not put her on the screen today. So some of this will be a little bit of review again, because we did a Puccini opera a few weeks ago, Il Trittico, so Gianni Schicchi. But just to catch some of you up again that weren't around. So Puccini was part of a family of musicians, and it was multiple generations that were the maestro of singing for the church in San Luca, in Lucca. And anyway, when Puccini was a child, his dad died when he was very, very young. And it was kind of one of those positions that was handed down generation to generation to generation. But since Puccini was, I think, six, they're like, okay, well, that generation's done now, and we're going to move on to another family. But he continued to study, and he studied after he studied in the schools there, and then went on to the Milan Conservatory and studied opera. And one of his first major works, and I still think it's a really cool work to sing, is his Messa di Gloria. He did one giant religious work while he was in school there, and I think I like it because it kind of brings back this as and as we get into Tosca, this Puccini, was he pro-Catholic, anti-Catholic? Where is he in this divide? And so, and I don't think that we have a really good answer quite yet, but it obviously is part of his life, because anybody in Italy at the time, it's all about the church state is such a big thing. And so right now, this opera is what last time we did Il Trittico, which is his late period. We're now in kind of the bread and butter, the middle period of Puccini. Not necessarily better, worse, or whatever, but this is kind of where he's getting his footing as a composer. The big three in this is La Bohème, Tosca, and Madama Butterfly. And so, and as you can tell, those three, you've never heard of them before. And so I think actually all three of those operas are in the top 10 most produced operas in at least the last decade, and probably for even longer than that. Tosca is generally always in the top 5. And I think it's kind of the top 5, it's kind of always a switch out between the 5 of them. It's usually Bohème and Tosca, and then you get La Traviata and a Marriage of Figaro, or maybe a Magic Flute, and a Carmen 1 year or 2. But beyond that, Tosca is very, very famous that way. Maggie, do you want to talk? I know we talk about the heroines and Puccini's muses.
We have to address again, and for those of you who were here before, some of this will be a good reminder. If it's new to you, one of my favorite parts about Puccini is how he handles his women. They are not cutouts. These are not, little stick figures that were peppered into the show to have, give someone for the men to talk to. These women are complicated. They have big feelings. And, when we talk about Callas and Tosca, there's a lot of similarities there. They both had a lot of difficulty in their lives. They both lived drama large. One of our first moments when we meet Tosca in this piece, she comes into the church and you hear her off stage and she's yelling her lover's name. And that is so typical of who she is as a character and who she represents as a woman. She is just truly a diva in every way, shape, and form. She's an opera singer. That's who her character is in the show. So she is a diva playing a diva. It's amazing. It's everything you think that sounds like, written by a composer known for movie-esque plots. So as much as we call this kind of shades of Verismo, it's Verismo with a lovely layer of soap opera over the top, but it does come from a storyline that has roots in reality. So I'll let John get into that, the political scene, a little more later, but as we get to know Tosca, she comes in and she's showing how much she's in love with her boyfriend, and and wants to spend time with him, and she has a show. And this woman has a life. She has a very big, beautiful life, and it is an untraditional life. And that is written by a composer who had also a very untraditional life. This man was in a common law marriage in Italy, a very Catholic country, for I believe 19 years. So he was well familiar with what it was like to live slightly outside the norm and to make that his norm. And he put her in a very similar position. And this scene goes from her sweeping in, and I don't know how else you would describe it, when she's, you know, yelling Mario, Mario, as she comes into this church where Mario is painting. Mario is very in love with his Tosca, but he is also an artist, and he had seen a beautiful woman in the church and couldn't resist. He painted her likeness as the Madonna. Well, Tosca's not an idiot either, and she just absolutely erupts in jealousy from seeing this beautiful woman up there who does not resemble her. And even though they have a long conversation and make plans and talk about things, she keeps coming back to this woman. And the last thing she says as he's waving her out of the church is she turns back and says, paint her eyes black, right? Just has to give a parting, yeah, honey, that's nice, but make her look like me. She is smart, she is aware, she is savvy of all of the intrigue around her. And as a star, and this is the character, of course, as a star in her community, she is in these circles with the powerful people who are leading her community. Some of them leading it well, and many of them not. Scarpia is our evil nemesis in this show, and he is a man who enjoys power, and he enjoys holding power over others. And he, you know, John had touched a little on religion. I'm going to have him go deeper into that in a minute, but he is not using religion in a pure manner, shall we say. He's enjoying the politics of religion and the politics of the power that comes from that. Whereas Tosca is genuinely a very devout woman. She might not be living the most strictly Catholic good girl life, but she has a relationship with her God. She has a comfort level in her practice of religion that really appears multiple times in the opera. So when we talk about that complexity of these women, Tosca is the pinnacle of that. She has, I mean, we could, and people have written, you know, books about this woman and how she's represented. And again, in today's world, we would already consider her a really interesting person to watch. You know, she'd be the one you want to have dinner with. When this show was written and when the play was written, that this was inspired by, this was really outside the norm. So as we enjoy this music, as we celebrate Puccini's over-the-top everything, please know that this woman represents the most over-the-top that he does. This is it. This is as intense as it gets, in my opinion. All right, John, back to you.
So a little bit about Tosca at the premiere. It premiered, so Tosca takes place in Rome, and I'm gonna go back to that in a second. But when it premiered, it was based on a play by Victorien Sardou. And Puccini, I believe what I've been reading is as early as 1889 had already had like, I want to produce this play. And so it took almost a decade later that he produced Tosca. When it premiered in Rome, the critics kind of hated it because it was melodramatic. It was over the top to them, but the fans ate it up. And it kind of took me back to a Michael Bublé interview I had when I was reading this. And he had this beautiful statement. He's like, you can either be critically acclaimed or popularly acclaimed. It's hard to be both. And so very few artists ever are. So like, it's like the Beatles. They get to be both. But most of us get to pick one or the other. And so, so the big thing is we call this a verismo opera. And again, verismo means real. And so where this gets like, where we're getting in super realism is that Puccini was very specific. He wanted to, in Rome, he said it in Rome in very specific places. Like Act 1 takes place, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, San Andrea delle Valle, Act 2 is the Palazzo Fornese, and Act 3 is Castel Sant'Angelo. So these are real places like you could, when we're back into Europe and let in, you could actually go and at least be outside of all of these different places in Rome. He even went on to research, and he wrote to many of the priests in Rome to try to figure out what the exact plain chant, because in a clip I'm about to play you in a few seconds, he wanted to set the choir to as close to what the plain chant for that time of day would be to the exact music that he was putting Scarpia's aria over top. And so he was trying to get it as real. And then he went even down at the very beginning, we won't hear it in this clip, he even studied all the bells to figure out what pitch the different bells in that church would have been at that time of day, what they were playing, so that the orchestra would play that. So we're getting realism, like pretty much as real as you could get. And so I'm going to set up, right now, we're going to play a little bit of the Te Deum. And as Maggie was saying, Scarpia uses religion, and I'm going to talk in a second about kind of, we have this battle between an agnostic atheist and a very pious religious woman, and this person that kind of lives in this bubble. And this is where Scarpia lives, because he will be pious when it's good for him, but deep down he's not. It's all a facade. And so in this, which is really creepy, is he's talking about his lust for Tosca and what his plans are all the time, and it's in this underpitch of this very pious religious moment at the exact same time.
Before John plays it, I want to point out, to his point, that there are very few people who are critically acclaimed and popular. I believe you're using the Terfel, are you not?
Yes.
So you're about to hear one of the singers who has accomplished both in the opera world. And I had a hilarious, I will never forget it, seminar in my master's where a baritone was teaching, a professionally singing baritone, and said, Bryn Terfel is not an opera singer, he's a pop star. And hands down, every student in the class was like, what are you talking about? This man has a beautiful voice. And frankly, I don't care what he's singing, it could be the phone book. When he sings Scarpia, and I've had the pleasure of seeing him do this role on stage, it is incredibly believable. He is very creepy. He does a villain very well, and it's not too over the top. Like, he embodies it. You see it in how he carries himself on the stage, but it's not a cartoon. And at the same time, he has some beautiful albums of Welsh songs that are gorgeous, and I have no idea what he's talking about, and I couldn't care less. They're just lovely, and you just want to listen to them on a rainy day and, you know, revel in how his voice rolls out of him. So please enjoy him both critically and in terms of popularness. He's fantastic. He's really a great performer all around. And if you have the chance to see him live, you should take it. All right, John, go for it.
So when I was studying in my master's degree, the if we were to pick a deadly sin, like especially when we get into Act 2, it's like gluttonous. When Scarpia is on the scene, it's all about consumption. It's about consuming and so he kind of almost, this character embodies sin. And like, even you watch him like talking about Tosca, it's like he's ready to consume. And so it's a very, very creepy man. Let's talk a little bit about the setting. So it's always fun when they've decided to put, like, so we are thinking way, like, from 2020, we're looking at an opera done in 1900, but they were doing an opera set in 1800. And more specifically, they were doing an opera set in June 17th and 18th. That everything happens within a day, afternoon, evening, and morning of June 17th and 18th of 1800. And why I bring that up and why I'm being very specific is that at this moment in time, Rome is being occupied by Napoleon. And so when Napoleon had gotten there in 1798, he basically took it over very easily. And then within moments, like, he arrested Pius the Sixth, the Pope at the time, and Pius the Sixth went into exile. While Pius the Sixth is in exile, he dies. And in March of 1800, Pius the Seventh is now been named Pope, but he doesn't come back to Rome until July 3rd of 1800. So they're being very specific that we're in a Rome that is still a city church state, but the seat of the Pope and the papal all government is not really in charge. And so they're being very specific. And I think it's even cooler if we think about where Italy is at this time, because I was looking up just Italy in 1900, and you would have, like, this new government trying to take hold, but they didn't really have much. They couldn't do much. They had a very poor state because the south of Italy was very poor. The north was a little bit more rich. But you also had a pope that was upset that lands were taken away, telling the entire country not to vote. And so democracy was really, so we're kind of almost like, it's easy to talk about today by using a historical I don't think it was accidental that we're looking at almost simultaneous periods at the same time. So getting into a little bit of the religious and politics and things like this. So what I was reading and things like that, Mario, I'll go with Mario, it's easier.
His last name for everyone is Cavaradossi.
Yeah.
Kind of a mouthful.
So Mario is kind of friends with Angelo, or what is the political? I'm losing his name.
I'll give you the shortest.
Angelotti.
We're a bit far into our session. Yes, Angelotti. There's a political prisoner, and Mario is definitely on the side of the resistance, and he's trying to hide and help his friend, and that leads to him being called before Scarpia, who decides to use him as a toy in his play, as a pawn in his play to make Tosca submit to him. And so we have this beautiful love scene in the opening act, and then we have Scarpia kind of scheming and sending all of his minions looking for this political prisoner, and Mario's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm just an artist. And next thing we know, he's captured, he's beat up, they're trying to get all kinds of secrets out of him, he won't give them up. And eventually Tosca, when she sees what they've done to him, even though he begs her not to help them, she trades his life for the information that they want. And so she takes a note to the prison where he's being held that, to her knowledge, says, liberate the prisoner, pretend to kill him, and then let them escape. And so she tells him all of this and says, don't worry, just stand there, make it look real. And the firing squad shoots, and they are really shooting. So she goes over and thinks he's pretending, and says, oh, you're doing such a good job, this is so believable, and just doesn't realize that he is gone. And when she does, she can't live with what's happened. She can't live with so many levels of betrayal and losing her soulmate, and throws herself off of the parapet. And that's Tosca, a nice, uplifting, joyful story. But when you think of all the political unrest, and you think of who comes to the surface in that, who takes power when a new country is forming out of all of these little feudal systems, and when the Pope has been deposed, and is, for all intents and purposes, and it is these people who are hungry to take over, to fill that space. And Scarpia to the very last, and she kills him, by the way. I left a huge piece out. She kills Scarpia on the way out the door because he comes for her and she just can't take it. So she has nowhere to go. There is no safety, and she has lost her love. And here she thought she'd outwitted this horrible man, and even in death, he got her. And a funnier story, which I guarantee you at the time where I, at the helm, would have absolutely killed me. But my husband's first opera was Tosca at the Florentine, which is funny because one of my first two operas as a teenager was Tosca at the Florentine. So when we say it's a big first-timer great opera that you can find in many places, very true. And it was a beautiful Tosca. I'll never forget, they had a candle cross. So as you looked at the stage, there were beautiful lights set across a dark floor. And it was just candles on the floor forming a cross for the church. It was such a great look. It's just lovely. And right at the end of the opera, and Dave, my husband, really enjoyed it because it had such a great plot. One of the things John's talked about is how this opera is real and it moves with a true trajectory where you're drawn in and you're listening and the music is driving you with the plot. She threw herself off the parapet and she bounced back up. Tosca's mat had been positioned slightly funny and she just popped right back up over the parapet. And Dave looked at me because it's such a serious, gorgeous, anguish-filled moment. And he looked at me and whispered, "Was that supposed to happen?" And I was dead, you guys. I was sobbing with laughter. And it was so bizarre because that's such a poignant, impactful moment. You sit in the house when she jumps and you're just like, no. And instead we were laughing like 12-year-olds. It was terrible. So I think his appreciation for opera grew by leaps and bounds in that moment, because that is a true life, live performance moment that you would never get in a video. No one would ever let that stand. They'd cut it. But when we are in a theater and a live show is happening, that kind of thing can happen. And truly, I have to say it is one of my favorite live performance moments of my entire life, because we'll never forget it. And they did such a beautiful job with that show, and it didn't take away from it at all. But it was certainly a moment of levity at the end of a very powerful production. So I'm sorry, John, I kind of jumped in. 4 minutes, and as usual, John and I have powered through with lots of chatting. Catherine? Oh, you're still muted. I wonder if I can.
Okay, as usual, I have a comment. I did listen to Act 2 where she is in the office of the magistrate, and after she kills him, she forgives him, and then she arranges his body with these 2 candles, like in a Christian or Catholic funeral, and it just shows this deep religious side of her, and the worlds, the painter, the opera star, the bad guy, the magistrate, they all have their own religious framework, and she certainly is portrayed as a really, really good believer, and I was just really impressed with that scene.
I agree with you. I think that's incredibly.
I think especially the ending, I think is just where like the religion's all the way to the test. Like her last line, "O scarpia avanti a Dio," is like, okay, before God we will be judged together. And
right. I almost, like she's saying, I'll get to heaven before you.
Oh yeah. Mary? Oh, hang on.
We went Florentine, and before Tosca, and the hostess had apples with little knives stuck in for our name tags. You know, because eating an apple with a sharp knife, and you know, and then Tosca takes the knife that he's using to cut the apple and stabs him. And if you ever give a dinner party before Tosca, have little apples with knives for the place comes.
I love that. We will be copying that.
and the other thing is, if you ever want to go to Maria Callas's tomb, which we have visited, it's in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, but it's in the columbarium where you go down and you wind around, and it's not easy to find. But there's a little vase of flowers in front of her tomb, and there's music playing, and people visit that grave. And there's a Maria Callas Society that freshens the flowers.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that nice to hear? So,
you know, another random Callas story is they've actually, and I don't know if any of you have seen this, I haven't, but I'm so curious. They actually made a hologram concert of Callas. So
yes.
Perform.
It was in Chicago. Could you bring that here? Could you bring?
It would certainly solve a number of my problems at the moment.
We'd love to.
Holograms don't get sick.
Okay, look into it anyway.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions?
Sure.
I was just going to say, I saw my first Tosca was at the Florentine as well. It was 1966, 67. And I saw Andre House, and she was spectacular as Tosca.
Oh.
She was very dramatic, and the rest of the cast I'd have to look up. But she was remarkable. She really was.
Yeah. I have to say, if you've remembered her this long, I believe you. That's extraordinary. I love when you see a show where you're just, the memory of the performance is seared into your heart. It's incredible.
She was a great actress.
I love it. Do we have any last questions or comments? All right, I think I'm going to hand it back to Christine, but I will thank you all on behalf of the Florentine and on behalf of Rotary Club of Milwaukee. We love doing this with you. We're so delighted you guys. Some of you come back regularly. That's really fun. And hearing all of you chat before the session really made my day. It's so nice to feel like you're walking into a room with other people in it. So
Shocking.
thank you.
She said it all for me. So yes, so exactly. I look so forward to this each week. This is the social half hour. That is so much fun. And I love that everybody's chit-chatting before we get started too. So I look forward to when we can do this together in person too. Won't that be fun? Again, on behalf of Rotary Club and Florentine Opera, thank you so much for joining us. Maggie, thank you. John, thank you. Fabulous job as always. And what do we have next week?
Right now, I believe on the agenda is Thais.
Thais, one of my favorites.
Ooh.
Richard just sent a note asking if we will be performing in the theater in the fall. Unfortunately, we made the announcement at the end of last week that we are postponing our Rigoletto until the following year. But we are really excited because we have the wonderful good fortune, and I cannot tell you how excited I am about this. Our entire cast and creative team can move with us. So we will have the exact show that we've envisioned with the exact performers. And for any of you, if you know Francesco Miliotto, he is our artistic advisor. He works with the Chicago Lyric in Santa Fe and San Antonio. He and I have gone back and forth on performers, and we are like an old married couple. We have so many opinions. So I have to tell you, if we'd had to replace someone, it would have been a lot of nattering to decide who to put in there. So we are so sad that we will not be on the main stage in the fall, but we are very optimistic about the rest of our season and are making some creative adjustments with the wonderful good grace and new leadership over at the Marcus Center. I cannot speak highly enough about Kendra. She's a real asset for Milwaukee, and we are going to be ready for that. So our sadness for the fall. We have a few other things up our sleeves. So if you're willing to try some creative concert experiences, we might have a few things for you to try coming up soon, but we will not be on the main stage. So with that, I leave that tantalizing teaser of future performances to be announced. We will see you all back here next Wednesday, I hope. Have a wonderful week.
Bye. Thank you.